Welcome, folks, to another podcast session on building high-performance teams. Today, I'm delighted to welcome Stephen McDonnell, who is the founder and chief consultant with LiveUnbound. Stephen, great to see you today.
Great to be here, Dara. Good to see you, and thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
My pleasure, and I've been really looking forward to speaking with you, Stephen.
Right.
Stephen, to kind of kick us off, can you tell us maybe a little bit about yourself and your background professionally, and a little bit about yourself personally too? Anything that you'd like to share?
Yeah, that's always it's an interesting question. It's not the easiest question to answer, right? But it's probably the one you've got the most answers to, and the one you should know more than any other question you're ever going to be asked is to tell us about yourself. So look, coming from the north side, my accent probably gives that away, right? So the north side is where I was born and reared, and I don't take that for granted, right? It kind of gave me a good humble footing and setting to kick off from, and I played with the Glen Rovers Hurling Club sport wise. So in terms of kind of my life and what my kind of passions are and what really, I suppose, makes me tick and what kind of really resonates for me is sport is a huge one. Education was a huge one, and leadership and performance and all that kind of space and all that world. So I was involved in that from a very young age, and sport is where I kicked it off. I played with the Glen, then I played with Cork and represented Cork at every level. Played other sport, played soccer and everything else as well. So sport was a huge thing, and went to school. I from sport I understood the benefits of working hard and what working hard can do. Right, you can really see yourself getting better and improving and doing better, and as a result of that, you enjoy things more. So I kind of was in a position at a time where I had crossroads, and I made a decision then to start really in this kind of this work rate and this what I've learned through sport back into school and education, went to college, and with the mentality I have when you work hard, there's very few things you can't do, and as a result of that, I went into CIT and I came out the other side with a good degree in structural engineering. And from there, I worked with a company called Arup. So of Arup are they're a very good consultancy firm. I think you probably would have be aware of them. Some people are, some people aren't, but they're a huge firm in the engineering world, multidisciplinary as well. So that was a good footing for me in terms of understanding how the multi-functions, the multidisciplinary teams come together to produce an optimal solution for the client. And I went in as a structural engineer, worked there for 4.5, 5 years, and I made a pivot, a huge pivot, and I set up my own business. That was about 4 years ago now, and it was in, I suppose, ultimately performance coaching, being one-to-one or team coaching, and working with organizations to help them to do things more efficiently, more effectively, to do things better, and to, I suppose, utilize their teams and their people to enable themselves to do that. And on the flip side of all that is that the staff and the individuals within the workplace actually begin to enjoy their work a bit more, and come together and be more connected and do better and do greater things, right? Which ultimately then impacts on the world more holistically as well. So that was a huge kind of pivot for me, and I think what enabled me to do that was just a deeper understanding of myself. So I was always really keen on leadership and really keen on, how can I be the best I can be, and I understood that what I was really really good at and what my highest point of contribution to the world is working with people and working with teams, and to really help them to, for them to create their highest point of contribution. So I think with that gave me the confidence and clarity to understand that this is the right decision to make. And I suppose when you do that, and you've done the right thing, and you have clarity and conviction and determination, perseverance, you make it work, right. So I think at the moment I'm very happy with where things are with the business, and we've got a good 2021 ahead and a good 2020 behind us. So all good, looking forward to it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And of course, I heard one of your sessions with Gear recently, and following from that, I gave you a call. And I really, really enjoyed that session as well. I thought you had some fantastic insights, and that is a big pivot away from structural engineering into kind of performance coaching. But looking at your background and your sporting background, which is massive. You've had such a great career, and you've been like a senior leader, not only with your company now, but you've been a senior leader in the sporting world for so long, captaining Cork. I think, was it 2 years in a row, or was certainly
2
over
years, yes. So 2016 and 2017, but yeah, so that was really good learning for me, and yeah. was a great experience.
Yeah, massive experience. And there's so many, I guess, references to sport when you're talking about business. So I think that's really, really interesting as well. Can you tell us a little bit about kind of what leadership, what it means to you?
Yeah, look, I suppose it's just ultimately doing the right thing and doing just, I think when it comes to leadership, there's somebody like you can Google leadership and get thousands. I think it was 100 plus thousand the results come out in Google. So there's so much stuff out there. But
Yeah,
but for me, I think leadership, I really kind of boil it down to three questions or three components. And as a leader, when you're in a leadership position, your followers or your team or your organization, whichever leadership position you have, are going to be asking three questions of you almost automatically. And that's the first one is, are you good at what you do? Right, so they're looking at you and almost subconsciously they're reflecting internally. They're asking themselves the question: Is this person good at what they do? Right, so that's competence, right? So are you good at what you do?
yeah,
And the second question then is, do you care about me? And that's compassion, right? So are you good at what you do? Do you care about me? And then the last question, which kind of merges two of those questions together, is can I trust you?
mm,
And if it's yes and yes to competence and compassion, then trust is going to be there. And when trust is there, that's where leadership is really at its strongest and where the greatest impact can be had, right? So for me, that's kind of really what I would say leadership boils down to is keeping it really simple as those three questions and being able to answer those three questions in a way that your followers or your team, your colleagues say yes to those questions. Now, to get to that stage where they say yes, it's a whole different ballgame, and there's a whole lot behind that. And it isn't easy to get to that position, right? And
yeah,
very few people can get into that position where they're able to say yeah to those questions. So
yeah.
pack that
And
if you want, but it'll be there a while.
along those lines, in terms of leadership, do you think is it kind of nature, or is it more nurture? What's been your experience?
Well, look, it's definitely I would say it's more you learn it more. It's more learned than it is born, right? I would definitely
Yeah,
say, but there is elements of leadership that um your nature, I suppose your natural way of doing things could lead you to being a little bit better as a leader, right? And example would be some people are more actually naturally curious about people than other people are, right?
mm,
And that curiosity about people enable you to just be a better leader because you're curious about what makes them tick, what makes a team tick. And as a result of that, then you're able to ask the right question in the moment, or you're able to see things more vividly in terms of what's holding the team back or the people back, and support people better because of that. And you want to support people. So there's definitely elements in nature that come into play to make more effective leaders. But
yeah,
like anything, it can be learned, and if you're passionate about it, you can become a good leader.
yeah,
Um, so 100%. And I think what's often forgotten about with leadership is your own leadership of yourself. And
yeah,
I suppose that's something that I think is definitely worth mentioning. No, it's so many things I'd like to mention, but definitely one that's has to be there is your ability to lead yourself, and that comes down to your humbleness to know you're never going to be 100%. Your humbleness to know you're never going to be the best you can be, but it's to be both being on that journey
yeah,
and understanding that other people can help you along that journey as well, and
yeah,
your own character development, your own ability to understand your emotions and your impact on other people, your impact on yourself, um, your understanding of the quality of your thoughts will really dictate your output and your actions, and just being willing to have go into those thoughts and you know stop that fear loop, right, and start kind of redirecting to courage loops, and all that ties in with your own self leadership, and then your self leadership within yourself will dictate how you're able to lead other people in.
yes, yeah. So it's a lot of a kind of being vulnerable almost, and having kind of a growth mindset in your approach.
Yeah, I think look, vulnerability is a huge component of leadership, and so I work a lot with leaders and teams, right, and leaders and their actual team themselves, right. So kind of one of the sweet spot programs for me or project for me would be working with a CEO or a managing director and the leadership team,
Yeah,
and what I find is that you think about it, right, given Irish and given the culture in Ireland, there's when it comes to conversation, being vulnerable in conversation, that's not how we do things here in Ireland, right? And potentially globally as well, it's a difficult kind of area to become used to or comfortable with. And we think about, I kind of look at it in three ways, right? So there's three types of conversation you can have, and it's probably an easy way to explain it. So in Ireland, typically you're talking to someone, and the conversation is very much on the surface, right? So you're at that top level and you're talking about things like, did you see the score in the game, to watch the match, the weather's bad outside. So what you're really doing is keeping someone on arm's length and kind of waiting for the conversation to be over so you can move on and get on with your life, right? And from my experience working with teams, a lot of teams are actually at that level.
Right.
You can imagine their potential that's not been realised because they just don't have that relationship built, or they're able to have a deeper level of conversation with each other, right?
Yeah.
And the next layer down then is, I suppose, kind of you can be creative, collaborative, talking about solutions. You kind of go back and forth, right? But at the end of the day, you're still not stepping into who you are, still not being vulnerable, right? You're only kind of just still getting to know each other a little bit better, but you don't really know a person, and trust isn't built in that. You're still not able to trust, right? And this conscious but also subconscious. And then the bottom layer, as you already alluded to, is where you can be vulnerable. And to be vulnerable is to be yourself, to talk about how you feel, and to really engage in that level of conversation with someone, to want to help, to want to care. And when you really know someone and when you really see someone and they be vulnerable within that, is where trust is just forged and really developed. And if you get teams at that level, challenge happens in that space where you're able to challenge someone just to be better or to do better for the team. That happens in that space, in that level of conversation. Now you can challenge, but if you're not at that level, you'll be taken personally, and the defense will be on, and it's not going to have a positive impact. But if you're at a level where you know each other and you respect and care for each other, you won't get there unless you have that level of conversation. That's when trust is built and where you can do great things. Teams can do great things.
Yeah, they're great insights there.
And vulnerability is key, to your point. Vulnerability is key, and for a leader, even more so. Like for a leader, you need to be, as I said, competent. You need to be compassionate. You need to be able to build trust and enable trust. But they're not going to trust you again if they don't see who you really are, right? You don't step into it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love those insights, and I guess a strong character and confidence is required in any person to allow yourself to be vulnerable like that. Stephen, I know. Sorry, Stephen, go ahead. Say that again.
I said leadership of self. When you really develop yourself, then you can be vulnerable because you back yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Stephen, you've had the opportunity to lead teams of all different types. Can you tell me kind of what you see as the kind of key characteristics of a high performance team?
Yeah, no, it's a good question, and I suppose, look, when I do this work with teams, I kind of share my experience, and I kind of developed it. I call it 6 characteristics or 6 keys. I call it 6 keys to winning teams, or just 6 good insights that I like to share with teams that just are really simplistic and kind of break it down in terms of what, for it to be a really effective team, probably should be ticking these boxes, right? So, and the first one we've already alluded to, really just, an effective leader, right?
Yeah.
So for a high performing team, the leader is really key, right? And again, that leadership, that embodiment of being good at what you do and being vulnerable and understanding and humble and knowing that you can always be better, right? And the compassion to care for people, and then ultimately, then within that comes trust. So an effective leader, and within the team itself, for every person to know that they're leaders as well, and that embodiment of competence, care and trust is also key for them. So that's what I would say is really, really key, and one of the first things. And you can see that when you look at teams and underperforming teams and poor teams, look at the leader and what does the leader display, what characteristics does the leader display, how do they operate within the business, and you might see the team kind of following suit in that way, and a lot of ineffectiveness and poor results come out of that too. So looking at the leader is a key there, and that's why I always, when I work with a team, I try and get in with that leader as well and try and create that shift from, I'm looking at a team to create a team ineffectiveness to effectiveness, or from poor performance to high performance.
Yeah.
The potential is here. What's been realized is about this much. So we bridge the gap with the leaders. There's always room for improvement, right?
Yeah.
Going from good to great, or going from mediocre to good, right? And mediocre to great itself. So that's the first thing. The second aspect, what I'd say is just, and you're probably used to hearing this one, is just, why do we exist? So that common mission or purpose, right? That that the team understands why they exist. The team understands why they're a team. The impact of why they're a team. The impact of when they do things right, what happens, and why it's important for them to be a team. So that it's nearly a purpose, right? Why do we exist? What's our purpose? Why are we here? And for them to come together collectively and to, I suppose, to develop or have dialogue around that, and collectively come together to maybe nail a statement within that. This is why we exist. As a result of why we exist, this is the impact we're going to have. So that type of work is the work that I always try and do. When I'm working with teams, there's foundational stuff that you need to do first with teams, and then you need to layer on with kind of more emergent kind of processes, right? With the foundational stuff and the structural stuff for teams. That common purpose and that purpose of why we exist is key. One of the early things you need to do. And that rallies the team around it then, and you can start filtering on the other work. So the other work then being, so that's number 2. Number 3 is, a culture. So the culture, right? So what is a culture? It's really dictated by behaviors. So high performing behaviors for this group. So if this is our purpose, this is where we want to get to, right? So your vision is what would make, so an understanding of your purpose, and when that's in play, what does that look like? So what are we doing? What are we achieving, right? So in a year's time, if we were to fulfill our purpose, what would we have achieved, right? So that collective, understanding, right? And then, okay, how do we need to behave to enable ourselves to get there?
Yeah.
So what behaviors are we going to display that will make sure and ensure we get to where we want to get to? We fulfill our purpose, but we enjoy it, and it enables us to do great teamwork. And every team that I work with has different and unique behaviors. Some crossover, but never have the same. 5 or 6 behaviors, or even less, never have the same.
Right. Okay.
So the team develops that. So the team needs to understand that and develop that. It's not going to be someone else saying this is how we're going to behave. What happens in that situation, there's always going to be kickback. The team is unique within themselves. It's their collective is what needs to be tapped into. To tap into that, they need to arrive at those behaviors, right? So and I could get into the behaviors, but you can imagine what they are. You're talking integrity, honesty, effective communication, right? So all these might be buzzwords in ways, right? But it's not just the behaviors, what that looks like in play then. So you'd have a behavior, but you'd have a statement and an image behind it. What it looks like in play. So what does that look like for us in play? So we're talking effective communication, or we're talking ownership and discipline. Okay, when as a team, what does that look like in play? What does it not look like in play? What would people see, right? So you go in behind that, and you're working behind that, and then it becomes embedded, and then it becomes a position where you can challenge each other, because you're not challenged personally, you're challenging back to those behaviors, right? That work that we've done. So number 4, right, is just bandwidth within the team. So what I mean by that is just diversity and complementary skills, right? So you need keeping things simple, like you need to have the people that can do the job, right? And complementary skills is a huge part where you can come together collectively and be better than what you are individually. Diversity is huge as well. People from all different backgrounds and ages, right? Because you might have someone who's 50 years experience and is absolutely exceptional in what they do. But that 20-year-old graduate that comes in is going to make them better. By their curiosity, by their asking questions, by their mentorship. It gets them, and their energy levels up, and it gets them actually, thinking about things in a different manner, right? So that diversity is key. And it's like the right people in the right role is doing the right things right. If you've heard that before, the right people in the right role is doing the right things right. So that's what that one ticks, right? That's that box ticked. And then so I suppose I keep riffing on this, but number 5, what I find really holds teams back is some elephants in the room, right? And what those elephants in the room are really beliefs, negative internal beliefs that limiting beliefs that are within the team. So really having an empowering belief, right? An unwavering belief that we can achieve whatever it is we put our collective effort towards. And I like to do some work in that area, because when you do that work, it's probably the more powerful element of the work you do, and when you come out to the side, but a belief statement, right? An empowering belief statement. That is unique to this group. It's really powerful, right? Really powerful, and it really kind of glues the foundations together in a way. That's 5. So I got one more, and this last one is I took it from Google, done a study, right? It's called Project Aristotle. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. You might have heard of it in your research. But Project Aristotle is a study by Google, and they studied. They've got thousands of teams all over the world, and what separates the good teams, I suppose, what separates the great teams, exceptional teams, outstanding teams from the good teams, right? So what does that separate? What's that factor that separates them? And it was kind of 2 things that really are one thing, are 2 sides of the same coin, right? So sort of conversational turn taking, right? So conversational turn taking, as you'd imagine, is you've got a team, 5 or 6, And ultimately, if you've got a team of 6 that everyone is speaking more than 6 at a time, that there's no voice or 2 or 3 voices that are governing everything, every conversation. Because ultimately, if that's the case, you're not tapping into the collective bandwidth of 6 and the intelligence and the skill set of 6 people. You're only really tapping into the 2 or 3 or even the 1 or 2. And that leads to mediocreness or average. So I think that's the first thing. Within a team, everyone is valued equally, and that's how that displays itself, manifests itself, is that your voice is heard equally and just as much as other people in the team. So the flip side to that, or the other side of that coin, is that when you do speak, that you're listened to. So it's ostentatious listening, right? So ostentatious listening is a word that describes really listening, right? And listening not to respond, but listening to just be in a position to take in what the other person is sharing and to just value what they have to offer, right? So that was the difference, right? And that then again underpinned in a way and linked closely in with psychological safety. So psychological safety, stepping into who you are, being yourself, expressing feelings, challenging each other, being willing to make a mistake, own up to a mistake. That conversation, taking ostentatious listening really, I suppose, was a catalyst for psychological safety. Not all helped Google to understand what separates good from great. So there's some good stuff there in terms of the keys that I kind of tap in with it. And when I do work with teams, when I do the structural work, which is kind of foundation stuff, I set the tone for this. I set these in motion. I set these keys in motion, and we start going into these different areas.
Excellent. Usually when I'm speaking to people or chatting to people, I'm taking down notes, and I'm itching to get some notes there. That was really, really, really great information there. I loved that, Stephen. Really useful and practical. Can I ask you, in terms of, kind of high performance teams today, and with the era of remote working, have you seen what sort of changes are you starting to see? Do we need to change the fundamentals? Are they the same, or do we need to adapt them in this new era?
I think the fundamentals and the principles around what separates poor teams, good teams, and good teams and great teams, I think they're the same, right? So I wouldn't overcomplicate things because we're in a remote world, but there's a little bit of a shift in terms of how those principles are honoured, right? I think there's a little bit of a shift needed in that, to tap into the collective, intelligence and the collective strength of a team. They need to be really connected, and to enable them to be connected, you can't just they can't just see each other every so often, and I think in the virtual world now, a lot of the cameras are off, right? And that doesn't lead to real connection and real collaboration, right? So I think they need to facilitate and give themselves space where they can have that collaboration and connectiveness online, right? So whenever they come together, every team is unique, right, in terms of what would make them really tick. And some teams might come together for 10 minutes every morning by a huddle, and maybe weekly for an hour, right? Or some teams might do it differently. But when they do come together, it's to have the cameras on, have a nice, to utilize that 10 minutes and to utilize that hour as, optimize it, and for them to really come together and have the conversation first around, okay, we're going to come together. This is the block of time we have over a week. We got the huddles, and we also have that weekly meeting. What do we need to do, and what do we need to discuss within that meeting? How are we going to operate within that meeting to enable us to have the most effective time and use of our time, right? And to have that conversation first, and then for the team to come together on that, and then go to the set, and then to get after it, and to be there and to connect, is what they should do, and how they should do things. I think some teams are doing that. The other thing I noticed as well, just through my work, is that graduates actually are finding it very difficult because they come in and they need to learn, right? And without being in the office, as a graduate, when you come in, I would say you need to ask 100 questions a day, right? And really get after it. But when they're at home and all they do, everything is through Zoom or through Microsoft Teams or whatever else, and it's going to be it's very hard for them to kind of, in the middle of whatever they're doing, to have a conversation with someone, to ask a question about how they're doing something, or what the other person might be talking about in a way, so all these conversations are stifled. So I think they need to create space for that to happen, right? For maybe you can call it office hours, or every week we're going to have 2 hours in this block of time where we'll come on, and it's just going to be let's just no agenda, just come together, and any questions people might have or whatever else it is, you have that space, right? So there's many things you can do, but what I say is just the way the virtual world is, we need to really hype up in terms of our connection and collaboration, communication, and bring that to the next level. But underlying principles are always going to remain the same. It's just about how we honour those. It's what will be tweaked and different. And every team is different, right? So it's just about and all the answers are within the team. Just ask the questions.
Yeah, that's a really cool insight, and you know that around the graduates, and I've heard that come up a few times. You know, when someone is coming into the company and they're just onboarding, and like I remember starting work a couple of times with different companies, and it is, as you're saying, it's 100 questions a day. And sometimes you can kind of ask people on the way to the canteen or when you're getting a cup of coffee or at the water cooler, and that's kind of gone now. So you have to find another way to facilitate it.
Yeah, and they're all missing that, Dara. Like, I mean, I know I mentioned graduates, but with the work I'm doing, and I'm actually lucky enough to be working with a client, and I'm doing a resilience program, right? Resilience and a connection program, just to mitigate against the impact of COVID-19. And the brief really was, there's an uncertainty, there's an anxiety around that, but there's also a lack of connection and isolation. So we need to kind of bring people together. So it's so again, like it's with teams, because they can see the benefit of bringing teams more closely together and utilizing the time for them to be together in a way that they're having real conversation, and they're learning some tools along the way to be more resilient. But it's also with kind of individuals within the organisation that want to connect, right? So they want to build greater bonds with, right? So they're taking leaders from different functions that, you know, if they had better relationships, would greater impact on the business, right? And that's only side note. Ultimately, they're looking to take care of the employees. But you know, at the end of the course, you know, we have some time where we we have some feedback and we have great conversations, and even throughout the program itself, I'm finding that the guys that are there even 20 years, 15 years, or have that huge experience, are just delighted to be in a position to just talk to you, just go into a breakout, or just have a chat, and they really miss that. You know, they really miss that piece around how you doing, what's going on for you, you know, how's life going, and just having that normal conversation, you know. And even sorry, Daria, go ahead.
No. That's really interesting. Even for people with kind of so many years experience, it's still you can become isolated. I mean, it seems to like it takes real effort to kind of maintain those kind of off the cuff conversations, those conversations that make us human. It's not just about work all the time.
Yeah, no, definitely, Daria.
Are you talking to organizations about particular digital technologies that they should be adopting? I mean, you mentioned there, turn the camera on. I've heard that from a few people, and it seems to make so much sense. You can see people's faces and their eyes, and there's a bit of body language that you can share, even though it's only from here up. But how is that kind of a piece that you're looking at, or what's your experience in terms of?
Well, I suppose, Daria, good question. I mean, look, what tends to, I suppose, just to come back and circle back a little bit, I think your the point I remember when I was kicking off a piece of work with a client, and when we went from in person to say, okay, let's pivot, let's do virtual. You know, the first thing that person said was, you know, look, we don't do cameras now. You know that, right?
Right. Okay.
We don't do cameras within. I won't say the client, but we don't do cameras, and you know, obviously my reaction was the same as yours. I kind of looked at him and said, look, that's going to change, right? And I tell you why it's going to change, why it needs to change, and to be fair, it has, and they've really adapted and pivoted and drove on.
Yeah.
But I think that was probably, you know, a mindset of a lot of businesses, and I'm hopeful that they've all kind of pivoted in terms of that mindset, because to have the cameras on means that there's a greater connection and a greater bond, and that will really help people that are probably craving that. And I think everyone is, and as human beings, it's our nature to crave that in a way, right?
Yeah.
But to tie you back to your question, look, you know, as a facilitator, right? So as what I do is I really, you know, I obviously have to pivot. I had to pivot big time online. A lot of stuff of what I do was online anyway, but I had to really kind of get really better at it. And thankfully, I could say that I've gotten a lot better, and I do good things now virtually, and the people I work with are all starting to see that, and I've been asked then to kind of share with them how to do X, Y, and Z, so they can take it back to their teams and they can take it back to the business. So there's a couple of things, you know, around how to, you know, looking at Zoom and Teams and the different online platforms out of there, you know, how to really optimize that. So simple things like breakout rooms and doing different things there, so they understand that, and then they can take it back to their own teams, right? That it's not just when they come into my session that it's done. They can do it within themselves. And also looking at Jamboard, right? Just like a virtual flip chart, and Padlet is another kind of mural, and Miro, all these different things that they can start to use to just to create a better experience when they come together online, right?
Yeah.
So I've been sharing kind of how to do that and how to work with those platforms, and they've been experienced it through my work with them as well, and they're now starting to do that, right? So I think the leaders and the managers are starting to take on the role now as kind of a facilitator as well,
Yeah.
because it's not about just stepping in and having conversations about okay, stepping in and setting the scene where they can be more effective in terms of what they do within the time online.
Yeah.
And there's so many platforms out there that can enable that. So they're starting to kind of look into that now,
Yeah. That's yeah. The technologies are fantastic at the moment. I mean, I think that the video technologies in particular are incredible. But you've named a few technologies there. Some of them I'm familiar with, others I'm not. I'm going to have to check them out and have a look.
Yeah.
Do you know, there was a question I want to ask you a moment ago, and I actually forgot to ask, is around in terms of high performance and kind of building those high performance teams. What are kind of what's the one or two, or even if it's just one, what's the biggest kind of challenge that you've come across when you're looking for that high performance?
Okay, I suppose look, there's a formula, right? You probably heard of this, right? But it's a guy called Tim Galloway, and he wrote he studied performance. He wrote some books, in his time, right? And he came up with a formula for performance. Very simple. Um, Potential minus interference is equal to performance, right?
Right.
So potential, right? Just to unpack it a little bit. Potential is how good you can be, how
Yeah.
your greatness within you, your greatness within the team, right? Collectively, it's the same principle, right? So your skill set, your character development, your self awareness, your leadership within yourself, your ambition, all these things will go in with that potential, right? And you could say potential is limitless in a way, because
Yeah.
as I said, you can always be better, right? Um, and interference then is what gets in the way, right? So interference really is, when it comes to an individual level, is you standing in your own way, right? Your
Yeah.
fear, your negative mindset, your lack of belief, all these things are interference. And also when it comes to a team, it's the same principle. And that's the biggest thing that gets in the way of a team performing ultimately as well as it can, as an individual performing as well as it can.
Right.
So that interference is what's the biggest thing, and that interference ultimately is you getting in your own way. Your mindset, your lack of belief, your fear, your lack of mental toughness and resilience, and wanting to deal with adversity and ability to deal with it. And that's what I find to be the biggest thing. And some people, I find that when I work with teams, that actually a couple of people were rooted out, I suppose, and were exposed for their I suppose the word I'm looking for, that they didn't want to be in a high performer team, that they were
Right.
quite happy to be in a comfort zone and to not be in a high performer team.
Right. Right.
Like they were quite happy to sit there and to do minimal stuff and get through and come to the side. And
Right.
when it comes to doing the work to be high performing, that gets exposed, right?
Yeah.
And ultimately, what that is that's not them not willing to make a shift, is their interference, and
Yeah.
they're not wanting to step into the interference and deal with it.
Yeah.
And ultimately, to deal with your interference, step into that stretch zone. There's that graph of comfort zone, stretch zone, and panic zone, right? So when you're in that comfort zone is where high performance doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And a huge challenge for teams is that there's a lot of people in that comfort zone,
Yeah.
and they're not willing to step into the stretch zone. So you think about, high performers really dislike the people that are mediocre, and the mediocre people really dislike the high performers, and you can see why, right? So that's a huge challenge within teams as well.
Excellent. That's I haven't heard that before. It makes total sense. It's a great insight. Can I ask you, in terms, this is my last question, Stephen. I think it probably leads on from this one a bit. In terms of kind of yourself as a leader, you're a founder of a company. I mean, you've pivoted from structural engineering into kind of coaching for organizations. You've moved from being, a high performing sports person into the business world successfully. I mean, that takes a lot of effort, and a lot of
Yeah.
belief in yourself. Kind of, what do you do? Do you have any hints or tips about how to bring the best version of yourself so that you yourself can perform at kind of peak capacity as much as possible? Anyway.
Yeah, so I suppose, the first thing that came up there for me was that you need to really be holistic around your own development,
Mm.
and not to develop yourself just physically or, mentally and get a PhD in one area, and neglect the other areas of your life, right? So I'd say just holistically develop yourself. And, when I work with leaders, that's a huge thing, is that they kind of neglect certain areas of their lives. So it's just unpacking that for them and getting an understanding of that. So what I'd say that the areas are, right? So I call it the 5 domains of balance, or the 5 mountains, right? So physical, mental, emotional, intuition, and spiritual, right? So really having an understanding where you sit, where you rank yourself within those, what they are, where you rank yourself within that, where you want to be, and how you bridge the gap. So that's what I perceive to be the difference between okay and really high performance and fulfillment as well at the same time. And I suppose when I break it down, I kind of look at it in a way that I call it 6 pillars to well-being, if you want to call it that. But 6 pillars to high performance at the same time as well. So the first one is breathe well. So breathe well. I mean, you can look at breathing, and high performers are optimizing their breathing. The most healthiest people in the world are people that optimize their breath and they breathe effectively. And I won't get into it, but what I'd say is that for listeners out there that are interested in actually that concept of how they can breathe more effectively and the benefits of that, first of all, Google the benefits. And the second thing I'd say is build into your life a daily practice of box breathing. So box breathing like a square, right? So box, so inhale, hold, exhale, hold, right? And I won't get into too further than that, but plenty of research out there on it. But box breathing is really a tool that can help you to enhance your performance and enhance your vitality as well at the same time. And it's originated from the Navy SEALs. So the Navy SEALs looked at how they can perform better under pressure, and they identified tapping into their breathing efficiency and effectiveness will enable themselves to do that. And businesses all over the world took off with this concept as well as the high performance in sport, and even in the I suppose the healthcare sector as well. They've looked at how they can help patients to be more calm in the moment and balanced and centered, and breathing is a way they can do that. So breathe well is the first one. Sleep well. Obviously, your sleep hygiene and how you sleep is a huge determinant of how well you can perform, how your well-being, your current state is, right? So that's another one. It's so much out there. I won't get into it. Eat and hydrate well, right? So how you're fueling yourself, how you fuel yourself. You can imagine the people that fuel themselves well versus don't, and how they feel and how they perform on the flip side of that. Move well. It's our evolution and it's in our nature to move. So every day you should get up and you should get after it, even if it's just going for a walk. The last two then are, so think well, your thoughts. Quality of your thoughts really dictate the quality of everything else in your life. So don't be afraid to get in there. I call it starve fear and free courage. So you've got two, there's an old saying that goes, you've got two wolves within you, right? And who you feed, which wolf you feed will be greater and stronger. So if your thoughts are always negative, you're feeding that fear wolf and it's growing. And if you have to make a choice and a decision to start feeding courage. So the stats are crazy, right? I think 60,000 thoughts a day. Wow. 60,000, what to say, an average 40,000 to 80,000, 60,000. So if you look at that, even unpack that more. So 98%, this is something that really people struggle to understand. 98% of those thoughts are the same thoughts you had yesterday.
Right, okay.
Just repeating thoughts moving forward, just manifest themselves in different ways, but the same thought. And you just go one layer below that. 80% of those thoughts, 80% of your thoughts every day are negative. They're the stats, that's the science. So you can imagine what those thoughts are doing to you and the impact they're having if they're going to be negative, right? So they're fear loops, right? Fear loops just constantly going around. So there's a courage loop you can bring into your life, and that will help you to mitigate and minimize and bring that number down, right? And lift the courage number up, and you can imagine that then the positive impact that can have in your life. So being willing to get in there, mindfulness, there's so many mindfulness, developing positive mantras and repeating those to yourself, go from conscious to subconscious, will enable you to be able to think better, have better thoughts, better quality thoughts will dictate. It will enable you to have a better belief and a better life on the other side. And the last one, connect well. Connect well when you're, even with your family. You can be at that level with your family, or you can drop it right down and you can be vulnerable, be yourself. And that's where fulfillment in life exists, right? So be at that with your family and connect with your community and people around you, connect with nature, whatever else it is, right? So there are 6 pillars. So it's breathe well, sleep well, eat and hydrate well, move well, think well, and connect well. That's what a balanced life looks like. If you start to activate yourself in those areas, you start to see good things, right?
That's superb. That is superb. Really something practical. I'm gonna have to check out that box breathing. I've definitely heard of it before, but I'm gonna have to pay more attention to it. They're really superb insights there, Stephen. I think anyone who's watched this will get a hell of a lot out of it. That's been a superb learning session for myself, I have to say. I guess, look, I just like to leave you and say thank you so much for your time today. It's been really, really super. I've really enjoyed it, and the very best of luck with LiveUnbound going forward. I mean, it sounds like I could sit down here now and talk to you easily or listen to you easily for another couple of hours. I'm getting so much from it.
It was a great conversation, Dara, and you too. Thanks for having me on. I mean, appreciate it. It's always great to be able to share and to hopefully, make some positive difference on anyone that listens. And if anyone has any questions they want to ask outside of that, feel free to touch base. And so thanks, Dara. Really appreciate it. Good stuff, and wish you the best of luck with everything going forward.
Thanks, Stephen. Thank you.
Man.